Lymphocytes make up the majority of the adaptive immune response that we're going to go ahead and go through together. I want to show you the pathway, the general pathway that we see in adaptive immunity. First step is a phagocytic cell. These guys, they can be macrophages, dendritic cells, and basically these are responsible, they belong to the innate immune system, so these are non-specific defenses. They're responsible for initiating the adaptive immune response before those very efficient T cells and B cells can begin to recognize specific antigens to attack. They must first be presented the antigen. The non-specific immune system comes first. Prior to the adaptive immune system, they've already recognized that the body has a foreign substance. Most likely a pathogen, doesn't have to be, it can be an allergen, but there's a molecule associated on the surface of those guys. We call this an antigen. Antigen-presenting cells then undergo the process of phagocytosis, that's cellular eating. I can see this guy here engulfing that surrounding bacteria. We've seen this guy before, operating during the blood lecture. And that engulfing then, they're able to process that, it looks like a microbe here because I'm showing you bacteria, process that thing and then display the antigen on its surface of the cell. So this is, I'm going to go ahead and say my antigen presenting cell here. It undergoes phagocytosis, APC for short, and after eating that guy, they are going to present that antigen on the surface receptor. This is a surface receptor in this green cartoon image right here, this triangle, this orange triangle, that's an antigen that it wants to present to the adaptive immune system. I found something, here you go. You guys should probably look into this further. This might be pretty bad for the body. Okay. What gets activated then, truly part of the adaptive immune system, first are helper T cells. These are also known as CD4 positive cells. CD just named for a protein that they have located on their membrane. This is how we identify them. So these guys are activated by the antigen presenting cells. They have receptors that recognize the APCs and they say, hey, I see that you've got something. They're activated by this antigen that APC presents to them, and they themselves, they're called helper T cells because they don't necessarily attack the substance that's invading the body. They actually promote other cells to do that, but they're kind of the messenger. So in addition to them promoting themselves, let's go ahead and replicate more helper cells to go ahead and continue on this response of the adaptive immune system. They then go on to activate other T cells and or B cells. It kind of depends on what is attacking the body. Is it an allergen? Is it a virus? Is it a bacteria? Is it a tumor? All these are going to be different responses. So not necessarily T cells and B cells have to come together in the adaptive immune response. It depends on what's invading the body. Is it a pathogen, an allergen? Okay. One pathway that the helper T cells can then take is to activate a cytotoxic T cell. These guys are known as CD8 positive T cells for having the CD8 protein on the surface of their membrane. These guys bind directly to infected cells. Cytotoxic T cells are going to battle against those cells that have been infected with the virus. Influenza is a great example. There have been recent studies to suggest that coronavirus, novel coronavirus, there's an elevation of cytotoxic T cell levels in the human body, and that is promising to battle against future infections. Another pathway that helper T cells can take is to activate a B cell. B cells are actually going to work a little different than cytotoxic T cells, where cytotoxic T cells actually attack the cells themselves, the cells that are going to be infected. The B cells don't go into the battle straight on, but they initiate and secrete tiny little defenders known as antibodies. Antibodies are then going to attack the invaders in different ways. It depends on what type of antibody and what the infection is. So to see how a T cell and B cell works, so this T lymphocyte has been activated by the T helper cell, and the T lymphocyte is actually going to bind to a target cell. That target cell is going to bear the antigen that's found to be part of that harmful substance that's in the body. As you'll see in the next slide, these T cells are then going to secrete various substances, granzyme being a main toxic player there, that's going to kill off this infected cell that has, let's say, a virus. Maybe it's going to be a tumor cell. That T lymphocyte doesn't die itself. It leaves after doing the job, and then that infected cell then goes off to die via apoptosis. Nice fancy way to describe cellular death. So here's our B lymphocyte, my B cell, and I can actually see it looks quite similar to the T lymphocyte, that large nucleus, but these guys are going to work in a different way in that they're not going to actually go and bind to the infected target cell. They're actually going to secrete little defenders known as antibodies, symbolized by this Y-shaped protein here. They're my antibodies. They flow to the site of infection. Let's say a bacteria is a great example that antibodies target. They bind to the bacterium, as we can see here, at these triangles are actually telling me these are the antigens on the surface of the bacteria that the antibodies will recognize. And the antibodies actually coat that substance. It's going to promote a phagocytic cell, maybe that's a neutrophil, maybe that's going to be a macrophage, to come and eat up. To come and eat up that bacterium. So they work in a different way. The antibodies are little defenders, and they're not going to actually kill the target cell initially, but they're going to promote different methods in order to be destroyed by other components of the immune system.